Well, folks, that's 6 p.m. So if I could get the members of the Committee of Adjustment to come on screen. As noted, I have heard from Carol Parks. She is planning to join us, but she's having a little bit of technical difficulty right now. I've let her know that we'll get started and she can join in when she's available to. With that, I'll call the meeting to order for this, the Committee of Adjustment for Monday, June the 7th. This is a virtual meeting. As usual, if any member of the committee has technical difficulties, loses their connection to the Zoom meeting, we will pause for a moment to allow that member to reconnect. But assuming we still have quorum, we'll continue after a few minutes if they cannot. With that, I welcome everyone to the meeting and move into the agenda. Right. First up is the adoption of the agenda for this June the 7th. And is there anything to add to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Take Councillor Porter and Deputy Mayor Hagedorn. Any comments? And seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move forward. And we go to the approval of the Committee of Adjustment minutes from May the 3rd. We have the minutes before us. Are there any noted errors or omissions? Seeing none, I look for a motion to approve the minutes. Councillor Townend, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Any comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. So we move into the first of the public meetings. First up, item 5.1 is D13006-2021. We have the staff report before us, and we have Ms. Furness here to talk us through it. Ms. Furness, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this first application is an application for minor variance located at 242 Nicholson Point Road to reduce the floodplain setback to accommodate the rebuild of a dwelling. The property is designated shoreline residential in the official plan and zoned shoreline residential exception 7 zone in the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw does require a 15-meter setback from the regulatory floodplain, and the applicant is proposing to reduce this by 12 meters, reducing it to 12 meters in order to demolish the existing year-round cottage and replace it with a permanent year-round residential dwelling with a deck on an expanded footprint. Staff do want to note that there was an administrative error in the notice that was circulated, which indicated a floodplain setback of 14 meters rather than 12. However, the circulated sketch accompanying with it did contain the accurate measurements and the intent was clear. So we were of the opinion that this was a minor administrative error that didn't require recirculation, but we did want to raise that. Staff and the Conservation Authority are both of the opinion that the erosion and flooding concerns are being improved on the site, as the new house would actually be 1 meter inland from the existing structure. So in terms of the 4 tests of a variance, staff are of the opinion that the intent of the official plan is met as the use is permitted and there is no public health and safety concerns. The intent of the zoning bylaw is met as the erosion and flooding hazards are being improved and all other zone provisions for the structure will comply with the zoning bylaw. It's considered to be a suitable use for the land as the situation is being improved, and it's not anticipated to negatively impact the residential use on the site or adjacent properties. And we deem the variance to be considered minor as there's no anticipated adverse impacts, and it's in keeping with recent developments on the shoreline of Lake Ontario. Staff are therefore recommending approval of the application subject to 2 conditions. The first one is recommended by the Conservation Authority to maintain a vegetative buffer along the shoreline from the 12 meters to the water's edge in that setback, as well as a development agreement to be entered into for a grading plan to be provided as a requirement for the new house. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for the presenter? No, this is a public meeting. At this time, I will ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this application, either for or against, in person or by his or her solicitor. If any of the attendees wish to speak to this matter, please use the raise hand feature to indicate your desire. I'm seeing none. Does the clerk have anyone?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't see anyone with their hand raised for this application.
Thank you. If there are no comments or questions, last call for the public meeting. And then I turn back to the committee. Committee, unless you have further questions, I'd look for a motion. Go to Mr. Hagedorn.
Move to receive and adopt the recommendations.
So moved. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Buderick, thank you. Any comments from the mover or seconder? Anyone else? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We move to item 5.2, which is D10-010-2016 Front Road. We have the report before us and we have staff here to make a presentation. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So with your permission, the next three consent applications are all on Front Road on Amherst Island, and were all reviewed holistically with respect to a submitted drainage plan. So maybe easier if I could speak to all three at the same time, and I can note their differences in that, as it might make more sense to talk to them together.
Thank you. We'll take the presentation as one. We will need to do the motions as individuals.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So the first two applications we've considered to be Lot 1 and Lot 2 off the same landholding located on the south side of Front Road, across from 450 Front Road. So these two applications were originally proposed in 2016, but were deferred in order for the applicant to prepare a drainage plan. This was as a result as the engineering department had cited concerns regarding localized flooding due to drainage from the fields in the immediate area. The application was also deferred as septic system comments from the health unit weren't received at the time of the report. Since this time, a severance has also been proposed on the north side of the road, Front Road. And as a result, a drainage report from Jewel Engineering was prepared to support all three severance applications. So in regards to the two proposed severances on the south side of the road, each lot's intended to be 0.8 hectares, leaving a retained parcel of 21.42 hectares. And the lot area and proposed frontages for these lots will comply with the zoning bylaw. The property is designated rural with environmentally sensitive overlay in the official plan and zoned rural with environmental protection in the zoning bylaw. The proposed severance on the north side of the road is proposed to be 0.78 hectares and to keep a retained parcel of 5.32 hectares. And the proposed lot area and frontages on the north side of the road severance and retained parcel will also comply with the zoning bylaw. The north side property is designated shoreline residential with environmentally sensitive overlay in the official plan and also zoned shoreline residential in the zoning bylaw. Because the proposed severance on the north side of the road is a waterfront property, the Conservation Authority had requested a site-specific wave uprush study be submitted with the application to ensure that there was an adequate building envelope outside of the regulated 15-meter floodplain. The study did come back favorable to that effect, and the Conservation Authority was in support of the application. So in the review of all three applications, we review the consistency with the provincial policy statement. The provincial policy statement does permit residential development in rural areas, including a lot creation, if it's considered to be locally appropriate. It also speaks to development being compatible with the rural landscaping, as well as to protect agricultural resources. Staff are of the opinion that the severances, the proposed lot sizes and frontage are appropriate to maintain the rural character. A minimum distance separation calculation was completed due to an animal farm operation located to the west of 570 Front Road, and all three severed lots were located outside of that minimum distance separation buffer. The provincial policy statement also speaks to protecting natural heritage features and the protection of health and safety. And the Conservation Authority confirmed there was sufficient area away from the watercourses on the south side of Front Road for development to occur on those two severed lots, as well as the CRCA confirmed that there was a satisfactory building envelope on the north side severance that's outside of the floodplain. So staff are of the opinion that the applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement. Turning to the official plan, the county's official plan, the County of Lennox and Addington's official plan permits limited residential development in the rural area, but defers to the local municipal official plan for consent policies. So for that reason, we feel it conforms to the county's official plan. And with respect to the township's official plan, it contains a number of policies that are similar to the provincial policy statement, policies that I previously highlighted, so I won't repeat those. But the additional policies include limiting consents on Amherst Island to 2 per lot as of 1991, as well as obtaining favorable comments for a septic system. And all 3 applications are able to comply with those policies. In regards to stormwater management, the official plan states that a drainage and grading plan can be requested when it's deemed to be appropriate by the township or the Conservation Authority. And as a result of the flooding in the area, a drainage and grading plan was submitted for each application, which has been deemed to be satisfactory by township staff. So the recommendations in the drainage plan have been included as conditions in these severance applications. So for the first severance, the west severed parcel on the south side of the road has a condition for a development agreement to provide a grading plan that's specifically tied to including the grades that were presented in the dual engineering grading plan that was submitted with the applications. For the east severed parcel on the south side of the road, it requires the same condition for the grading plan, as well as an additional condition that the owner shall complete roadside ditch improvements adjacent to the north property line. And the severance on the north side of the road contains as well the same grading plan condition. And it also requires a condition to provide the township with a 5-meter drainage easement adjacent to the eastern lot line. In order to allow the township the ability to ensure proper drainage in the vicinity, as well as for the 2 severances on the south side of the road. So they've all been connected that way and thought about in the conditions. So staff are satisfied with these conditions that the applications conform to the official plan. With respect to the zoning bylaw, all the lot areas and frontages and minimum distance separation can be complied with. So the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw we feel has been met. So staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the noted conditions. And the last thing to note is that we have received correspondence from 2 adjacent property owners. The first one objecting to all 3 severances as their opinion it will negatively impact the drainage on their property, and some pictures showing that drainage were just emailed out just prior to the meeting that were just sent to us. And another landowner has concerns that more water will be directed to their property, and the culvert system that they've identified on their property is currently maxed out. And a comment was also made regarding the ferry system could be overwhelmed with extra traffic. Those are the comments that we have received. We are of the opinion that the conditions do satisfy the drainage concerns, but I'm here to answer questions. And I don't know if he's on here, if Debbie can bring him in if there's questions, but Corey Grant, our engineering supervisor, was with us here as well tonight in case there's questions specifically in regards to the drainage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, does the committee have any questions for the presenter at this time? Regarding, I'm assuming regarding all 3 severance applications. Seeing none, at this time I will turn to the public, to the audience that's present. If you are here to speak to, in favor of, or against these applications, please use the raise hand tool to indicate that you are interested in presenting this evening. I note one with the raised hand right now, Mr. Duncan Ashley. Okay. If the clerk would transfer him in, thank you. Mr. Ashley, can you hear us? We cannot hear you at this point. Mr. Ashley, can you hear us? You seem to be having some technical difficulty with Mr. Ashley.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Can you see me?
We cannot see you at this point.
Fantastic.
Welcome, Mr. Ashley.
Thank you, Council. I'm glad you're receiving these as a holistic report, because that's really the nature of my concern as well, and it's specific to the drainage that runs down the westerly portion of my property, adjacent to the Severance or subject property on the north side of the road. So our property sits at the nexus of all drainage from ditches coming from the south and from the west. 3 culverts run under the roadway at the corner of our property and the applicant's proposed property, and everything pours down the fence line where the proposed 5 meter drainage easement is proposed. And at the current time, based on the design that's submitted, it suggests a fall to, I think it's 0.3 meters or 1 foot depth for that drainage channel. And currently there is a dead furrow, I think is the correct term, but a foot deep trench along that on the owner's side of the fence, the west side of the fence. And we have examples of high water, if you will, where that is not sufficient. And in my mind, that means the proposed easement will not solve any of the drainage property or problems that negatively impact my property. No matter how fast that water gets from one side of the road to the other, there's only one way for it to come, and it's down our joint or adjacent property lines. I've sent pictures of some maximum events when water goes down that channel, and it basically just comes across my property. The destruction that it does to the shoreline through erosion is very apparent. It has been for years since we took possession of the property in 1998. I discussed with the engineering department several years ago, I believe, with David McPherson at the time, and as to rectifying that problem, he told me at that time there was no way you could compel the adjacent property owner to make any alterations unless it was subject to a development agreement or a severance. And definitely the owner at that time, Mr. Hunter, was not interested in doing something to help us out. He suggested I look at improvements on my side of the line, and I don't see it on these maps, but we're subject to a bell easement of 5 meters on that property line. There is no digging allowed, and you can see where the outlet for the current drainage system has eroded away probably 40 feet of shoreline, and the bell lines are exposed out into the water. And again, I sent pictures of what used to sit on the ground as far as bell markers and standards. Well, they're now in the lake. So you can get an idea of how quickly things erode. And if this was actually successful in directing water away from my property 100% of the time, it would just speed up that erosion. So my concern in the Jewel report is they don't seem to address any of the history. They're making a minimum change that I don't think will change the capacity. And end of the day, all the water that comes from ditches both ways on the south side of the road has to go down that property line. There's nowhere else for it to go. Adding graded properties will only steer more water downhill, and in my case, toward my property line. Adding entry culverts will just exacerbate the situation. And the flooding that we had, and I sent in the pictures, were in optimum conditions. Nothing blocking anything, just as these would be optimum conditions. Now you're not going to get a flood because we're in a drought. But this doesn't even take into account when the ditches are plugged with snow and ice. And it seems to be more the norm now that we get some snow, maybe we get freezing rain, but unless the township can be on top of every culvert and every entrance and every ditch, then it all runs over top of it. So a 5-meter easement with a swale that only goes down 1 foot will not change anything and will leave us wide open. So I just, I'm not against the severances as long as they do something to correct this while you're doing it. And I think we really owe it to all the homeowners and people that would be building on those properties. But it definitely shouldn't exacerbate the current situation. So sum it up, just like my old motions, not very well, but that's the thing, is it's what happens on my side of the road and that ditch's capacity, because the amount of water is never going to change. So the bell easement and the fact that I just don't see the capacity, and I see the severe erosion at the outlet into the lake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashley. Committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Ashley at this time? See no comment. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Hagedorn.
Thank you. I don't know if this is best suited going to Mr. Ashley or to staff, so I'll ask it and we'll see which one answers that. I'm just looking at the cross section of the proposed swale running along the property lines. Do we, and I don't see it on the drawing here, the existing swale that Mr. Ashley was talking about, do we know the width of that swale? When they would have done the drainage report, they would have taken into account current flows, proposed flows, and all that. So I'm kind of trying to get my head around the flow patterns proposed compared to existing, and the flow volumes, I guess, more is what I'm looking at.
I'll go to staff for that. Ms. Furness?
Hey, it's Corey.
Okay. Mr. Grant?
Okay. Yeah, so I don't think we're overly aware of what the exact swale is now. I don't think it's very well defined, which is part of the issue here. Is it's very flat and doesn't have a very well defined outlet. So the idea with getting this 5-meter easement, and we can work with the bell stuff, is to give us that opportunity to improve that out. So there's actually a ton of fall to the lake. There's about a 1.8 meters fall from the road to the lake over the length of that easement. So it's as far as erosion goes, the CRCA wouldn't be letting us do anything in there without improving, without erosion controls and something to stop shoreline erosion in that area. So the big thing here is giving us that ability to improve it. Without that in there, we, as noted, we wouldn't be able to go in and actually make any improvements, however slight. And Mr. Duncan's right, there's a ton of issues at the corner that staff are very well aware of, and I think our winter maintenance operations have been making adjustments to how they maintain the corner as well, which I think has started to help. But deficient ditches in the area, which the other part of the severance is our road widening. So with part of that road widening, that also gives us the ability to do wider and deeper ditches in the area, which will also help with capacity.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Mr. Hagedorn, do you have anything further?
Yes, I have one more. So Mr. Grant touched on it a little bit with the erosion. That was the next one I was going to ask about. So currently, the typical that's here doesn't show any erosion control, no rockfall check dams or anything like that. So is that something that would be designed or constructed as needed to control the erosion at the water? At the outlet?
It would be subject to a CRCA application and probably some other controls in order to get a more detailed design as to what you'd have to do around the outlets. So I would say that plan isn't intended for like the applicants or the new homeowners to install. It's intended as a proof of where the fall is, where the easement is. We can get, I think, 2.75% grade down that swale, which is quite a bit above what a minimum requirement in a ditch would be. And then as far as like detailed design for erosion controls, et cetera, that would probably be subject to the CRCA at a later date.
So if I may, just to sum it up then, so if this application proceeds, the final design of the ditch, the erosion control, and even possibly step ditch or to be able to handle more flow if it was needed, that would all be in the design process after, just prior to construction, then it would be kind of done with the Conservation Authority?
Yes, that's correct. As well, and probably in conjunction with improved ditching in the area as well to ensure everything works together.
Sorry, my volume doesn't seem to be in conjunction with what the last.
Oh, sorry. It would all be in conjunction, probably with looking at like the ditches and the cross culverts and making sure everything sort of works in tandem, right? So it's one big problem, I think, that we would probably be having an engineer look at. Or internal staff, our engineering staff, be doing a bespoke detailed design for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any other questions for either staff or the presenter? I'll go to Ms. Porter. Thank you.
Yes, this directed to Corey or whoever may answer the question. If we approve this tonight, we're approving it conditionally on a drainage and grading plan being satisfactory to the township. Is that plan going to be made available to the public prior to the approval, the final approval? And will the public have opportunity to comment on the grading and drainage plan being proposed?
Staff? Ms. Furness, Mr. Grant?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think generally the grading plan would have to be, it's part of submitting it after the process. So it would be at the consent fulfilling condition stage. So that's not fully part of like this public application. So it wouldn't be anything that would be typically posted and more of an internal review. Whether obviously could be accessed through freedom of information, or potentially we can look and talk with our clerk on whether that could be provided. I think the intent though is that the grading plan that is submitted right now with the applications, the development agreement specifically ties the grades that they have to be consistent with that. So that would not be changed unless they went through and got a change of condition to the severance application. So it does have to be consistent with that dual engineering grading plan, which is available right now and on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Actually, I have a couple questions. First off, just for my clarity, and it kind of echoes the previous question, would Mr. Ashley has presented today as an adjacent landowner, would the adjacent landowner be either informed or involved in the development of that drainage plan as it abuts his property?
Yeah, I think it would be very prudent for the consultation there, as with any improvements along property lines.
Okay, thank you. And the second one, just for my clarity, you've talked about the drainage at that bend in the road and the multiple culverts coming into it and the required drainage. The development of the drain in that location, that is at a requirement of the property owners, or is that a requirement of the township?
That's an interesting one for just that eastern lot on the southern severance. In order to get their drainage in order for the drainage plan that they submitted to work, there's a small section of ditch that I think is quite deficient. So in order to get their entrance culverts in and ensure the ditch has enough cross section, that piece has to be done along with the severance is what we're asking by the proponent.
So those are the responsibility of the proponent, but it will be under the direction and supervision of the township staff.
Yeah, it would be, we would have to, approve the final thing and would be likely supervising it. I want to say it's either 40 feet or 40 meters. I can look at the plan, but it's just a short section basically to get from that new outlet from the property. So where the stormwater comes off the property to the cross culverts that go to down past Mr. Duncan's property.
Thank you. And finally, just to make sure we are comfortable that the conditions that are applied to this severance or to these severances are sufficient to allow the township staff to ensure that the grading doesn't create the type of challenge that Mr. Ashley is presenting. Ms. Furness?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct. That's the intent of the conditions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? I'll go to Mr. Buderick.
More of a comment than anything. I mean, I know we're leaving in the hands of staff to make sure it's done, but the landholder won't have the opportunity I'm seeing to have another chance to who's the adjacent property owner to speak their mind to this situation. If we approve it tonight and then it gets unsatisfactorily moved forward going forward, I would like to almost defer this until we get everything done. I might be jumping the gun on that, but that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Okay. Before I accept a motion, I will ask if there's anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to this. I'm sorry, unless there's any more questions from the committee with regard to Mr. Ashley's comments. Okay, now we'll go to the audience. Is there any member who wishes to speak to this issue? Any of these three severance applications? I'm seeing no hands. And then I will consider that part closed and come back to the committee for a motion. Mr. Buderick, go ahead.
Just to defer until we do get everything settled, because this may not leave the adjacent landowner an opportunity to have their opportunity to speak to an issue if it is moved forward. And I know it probably would be done properly, but just in the off chance that it does not give them an opportunity to speak to make sure that they are taken care of with the proper drainage be put in place.
Thank you for your comment and the motion. All right. Before I formally accept the motion, Ms. Furness, is the clarity of the language there to defer this until a particular point where as I understand Mr. Buderick's motion, where the drainage plan is deemed sufficient?
Yeah, I think I understand. I mean, a little bit of clarity, I guess, on the exact point, because without the severance, we can't impose that the landowner do the ditch improvements and so on, and how everything was working together. So there's some parts that are responsibility of the landowner being able to do those ditch improvements as a condition of the severance. So without and I think that all of that working together, to see how it would work, I'm just not, and maybe Corey can jump in, but I'm just not sure how some of that work could be done without the severance being approved and imposing it on a property owner, unless Corey can comment without that piece happening, if he's confident that we could get more information.
I'm not aware of any way that we could get any additional information. Like, we couldn't do any improvements without the easement. And as far as a grading plan for the properties, it's all been deemed acceptable. But Public Works, Rick on the island and Alex have reviewed it extensively. So we're satisfied with the grading plan they've submitted for the homes and the severances. And yeah, as far as that outlet easement goes, it would just be the really, I think the only the grades are there, so we know there's the fall there, and the width to make an outlet channel. It would really just be down to final erosion protection at the shoreline, I think is really it. And like a little bit of details around the road, which our Public Works guys and engineering would be looking at. So
Thank you. Mr. Budrick?
I'm fine with that, I guess, going forward then, as long as we can make sure that the adjacent landowner can be taken care of and has a voice after the fact then. I mean, I know, like I said in my original statement, I have full confidence in staff doing the right job. However, I just want to make sure that it doesn't get pushed forward, that the adjacent landowner kind of gets pushed aside, that's all.
Okay, so am I taking it from that you're withdrawing the motion at this time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do I have another motion?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I just received an email from somebody who was trying to comment on the application. And he's just indicated that by email that he was trying to, he lost connection. So I'm just trying to establish whether or not he's trying to get some comments through.
I'm just seeing now that Mr. Hunter has his hand up. Is it Mr. Hunter that was approaching you, Mr. Voss?
No, it was a neighbor to Mr. Ashley.
Okay, and at this time, I will recognize Mr. Hunter. I know I said the public section was closed, but we have 3 different severances here, so I'll accept it. Mr. Hunter, if you can come into the meeting and make your comments, please. Staff, are you able to bring Mr. Hunter in? Thank you. And Mr. Voss, if you can follow up with the person who's contacting you to try to establish that connection. Mr. Hunter, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I guess you can hear me.
And we can hear you now. Thank you. Thank you for coming in, and please go ahead.
I have to apologize a little bit. My ears don't work very good anymore, so I have to struggle a bit with it. But I hear some of the comments on the swale going from road ditch down to the lake, and Jewel Engineering out of Kingston has already done extensive plans and engineering on that, and they would have been sent on to the planning department. I got them on my desk. I think there was a question how wide the top of the swale was going to be, and going off of memory, approximately 8 feet and approximately 18 inches deep. And it's 70, I'm guessing a little bit. I think it's 50, 75% that way now, but it's, it would need to be cleaned up and approved by the roads department that it was done right. But Jewel Engineers engineered all that stuff now, and I was under understanding it was approved by the planning and works department already. So it was professionally done. So I think that's already been done, and I thought already answered. It's not built, but it's designed professionally.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Committee, do we have any comments or questions for Mr. Hunter? I'm seeing none at this time. And then I'll say thank you very much, Mr. Hunter, for making your presentation.
Thank you for letting me speak.
And Mr. Voss, were you able to get the party attempting to communicate?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm just on the phone with him right now. He's the owner next door, Gary Filson, and I'm sorry, it's kind of messy, but we're going to try something here. He can't connect with his own. Put the phone up to the speaker and see if he can relay a message that way.
Okay.
If that works for committee.
And I'll accept that. And Mr.
Okay, Gary,
Filson,
go ahead.
Yes, good evening, everyone. How's everyone at the site?
and we can hear you. Okay.
Hello?
Go
Can you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes, my personal concerns with the severances on the south side of the road, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with my status with the township as being road supervisor for 12 years and working for you for 20. I had many issues with this corner with problems with the field flooding and creating problems with ditch and creating water going where it shouldn't go. A few years ago, just before I retired, we did some extra ditching and put an extra culvert in to try to override the situation, which does help. But the biggest problem is in the winter, when we get large amounts of snow, I've seen 10-foot snowbanks on that corner when drifting from the lake and also from the west, which creates a barrier. And then when it floods or we get a massive thaw in the spring, the water is trapped in that corner, and then we get these bursts of water. And if the ditch isn't open, it has nowhere to go. And putting houses in there, to me, is just going to create even a bigger issue. Also, if diverting water with ditching could send more water my way down through my property, which has to cross a culvert, which it goes across my laneway. Excuse me. And in the past, I've had problems with that, which I've increased my culvert size. But any amount of extra water is going to create major problems for myself and my property. In saying that, we're creating a big problem here for not only Duncan, my neighbor, and also myself if these lots are allowed. Now, I appreciate whatever you people can do, and I have dealt with this in the past, trying to rectify it for having issues with it, and I know what can happen there, and I have taken pictures in the past with this situation. So therefore, to me, it's not a good situation for this to be allowed, and that's my personal opinion on it. So I hope you people can do something about it. I appreciate your listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Filson. And committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Filson? I'm seeing none. Okay, and I'll make my second final call for public members to make comments. I'm seeing no other hands. Okay, I'll come back to the committee. Do you have any final questions? I'm seeing none. And then, Mr. Hunter, you've already had your opportunity to speak. I thank you very much anyway. Do we have a motion from the committee? I'll go to Mr. Townend.
Well, I guess it's a further question to staff. I mean, I would have seconded and supported Councillor Buderick's motion. I can't support the recommendation as it stands because I feel it's the cart before the horse. So I don't. I defer to staff as to how we can get around this in such a way as to have a sufficient drainage plan in place before the severance is granted. I mean, I'd like to be able to move forward with it, but I know the area well myself, and I agree with both Mr. Filson and Mr. Ashley's concerns with it, and I do think it's the cart before the horse. So I'm not sure how we could proceed in a way that could move it forward, but I kind of, I guess, put that out as a question to staff because, as I say, I shared Councillor Buderick's sentiments earlier on.
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Furness.
Yeah, so at this point, then I think I would recommend if the committee does want to defer it, but the motion not be to, because a number of these improvements can't be made unless we actually approve the severance to get the easement. But I could say though that we could defer to the next Committee of Adjustment meeting where we could prepare a supplementary report and have some more discussions on any potential options that might make things more comfortable rather than denying the applications in that case. Just to give us some time then to go back and recollect and bring an additional report forward.
Okay. Any other comments from committee before I ask for a motion then? And we do have 3 different applications here. So I will ask for the motion on the first, which is item 5.2. Committee, someone willing to make that motion? Mr. Townend, so moved.
Motion to defer until the next Committee of Adjustment meeting, subject to further staff report.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Buderick. Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Opposed? None. Motion is carried. Okay. For items 5.3 and 5.4, I'm willing to assume at this point that there will be a similar direction. Is there anything that staff need to add to the next 2 items, or can I just go directly to questions from the committee and or motions?
No, there's nothing else to add.
Okay, then I'll go to item 5.3 and ask council if you have any questions, but I'm assuming a motion. I see no questions. Mr. Townend, so moved.
So moved, same as the other one. Motion to defer until the next Committee of Adjustment, subject to further staff report.
Thank you. And I saw Mr. Buderick's hand for second. Thank you. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. And for 5.4, again, I'm assuming the same status. Can I get a motion? Mr. Townend, so moved, seconded by Mr. Buderick. Any comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We are scheduled, that brings us to the end of the public meetings. We are scheduled for our next meeting on July the 5th. Is there anything else the staff or committee wish to bring forward at this time? And then I will call for a motion to adjourn the Committee of Adjustment. And Ms. Porter, second by Ms. Parks. Thank you. Any comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We are adjourned. It is now 6:47. We are scheduled to go into a committee of the whole meeting immediately after this. Let's take 5 minutes to let staff close this and start the next meeting. And we will attempt to, if the clerk is amenable to it, we will attempt to start the committee of the whole. I'm going to call it at 6:55. Does the clerk think that's reasonable?
Yes, I'm hoping it'll just depend for the converting of the meeting. So I'll get it up as soon as that's done.
Thank you. For the audience who wishes to attend, hopefully we'll be starting at 6:55 to 7-ish.
And it is a
Okay.
different link. So just to make sure to go to the committee of the whole link.
Yes, thank you.